The blueprints arrive at 4:47 a.m. Not physical blueprints. Nothing you do has ever existed on paper. They arrive as a sequence of encrypted file packets across 3 separate servers, each one routed through a different jurisdiction, each one containing 1/3 of a complete picture that only assembles itself inside a specific piece of software running on a specific laptop that has never been connected to the internet and never will be. You built the assembly protocol yourself. You build everything yourself. That is the entire point of you. You are sitting at the kitchen table of a rented house in Zurich when the alert comes through on the air-gapped system. The house is clean, tasteful, anonymous, the kind of place that suggests a successful professional on a medium-term assignment, which is exactly what your cover identity suggests. There is a half-finished cup of coffee on the table. There is a book open on the counter that you have been reading the same page of for 4 days because you keep getting interrupted before you finish it. These are the details of a life lived around the work, rather than inside it. You open the assembly software. The 3 packets combine. The picture resolves. You read it once, then again. Then you close the laptop, finish the coffee, and begin. You did not always build systems for other people to operate invisibly inside. Once, briefly, you built them for yourself. You were 28, 2 years out of MIT with a doctorate in computational economics, and you had spent those 2 years at a financial technology firm in London doing work that was technically brilliant and profoundly boring. Risk modeling for institutional clients who had more money than they knew what to do with and wanted mathematical assurance that they would continue to have it. You were the youngest person in the building with your clearance level and the only one who found the work unsatisfying, which told you something useful about yourself. The thing that changed everything was not dramatic. It was a conversation at a conference in Geneva, the kind of conference that exists primarily to allow people who already know each other to confirm that they still know each other, with a thin layer of professional content arranged on top. You were presenting a paper on systemic risk architecture that 3 people in the room actually understood. One of them found you at the drinks reception afterward. His name was Aldrich, Belgian, 50s, the kind of face that had been through several different versions of itself and settled into something unreadable. He told you your paper was interesting and then immediately asked you a question that had nothing to do with your paper. He asked you whether you had ever considered that the most elegant solution to systemic risk was not to model it, but to design systems in which the risk was structurally invisible to the people responsible for managing it. You told him that sounded like a description of fraud. He smiled and said it sounded like a description of architecture. You had dinner, then another dinner 3 weeks later in Brussels, then a series of conversations that expanded gradually in scope and specificity, each one delivered with the same unhurried patience, each one adding a layer to a picture that was assembling itself in your mind with the same logic as your assembly software, one packet at a time, until suddenly the full image was there and you could not pretend you hadn't seen it. Aldrich represented a consortium. The consortium had clients. The clients generated wealth at a scale and through mechanisms that made conventional financial infrastructure, banks, exchanges, regulatory frameworks, not just inconvenient, but structurally incompatible. What the consortium needed was not a money launderer. Money laundering was a solved problem, crude and well understood by the people paid to find it. What the consortium needed was something that had never been built before, an architect. Someone who could design financial ecosystems, complete, functioning, internally consistent economic structures that processed and normalized capital flows of any origin so thoroughly, so elegantly, so deeply embedded in legitimate global commerce that the question of origin became not just unanswerable, but structurally irrelevant. Not hidden money, transformed money. Money that had genuinely become something else by the time it reached the other end of the system you designed for it. You asked Aldrich how much. He told you. You asked him when he needed an answer. He said there was no rush. He said it in a way that made clear there was a deadline. You gave him your answer that night, in the hotel bar, over a second glass of wine you didn't finish. The file that assembled itself on your laptop this morning concerns a project you have been building for 14 months. The client is referred to in your internal documentation as Structure 7. You do not know who Structure 7 is. This is deliberate, not Aldrich's deliberateness, but your own, a protocol you insisted on from the beginning of your relationship with the consortium. You design systems. You do not need to know who uses them. Knowing who uses them creates a category of risk that has no architectural solution. You are not a node in the system. You are the person who draws the nodes. Structure 7 involves the integration of capital flows across 4 distinct economic ecosystems: a network of agricultural commodity trading entities operating across sub-Saharan Africa, a mid-sized European infrastructure fund with genuine institutional investors who have no knowledge of the fund's secondary function, a digital asset architecture operating across 11 jurisdictions with regulatory frameworks sufficiently nascent that the compliance requirements remain interpretable, and a charitable foundation headquartered in Liechtenstein with a genuine humanitarian program that generates genuine goodwill and genuine tax documentation and processes approximately 30% of its intake through channels that the genuine humanitarian program does not know exist. These are the 4 ecosystems of Structure 7. Each of these ecosystems is individually legitimate, enough to withstand a serious regulatory examination. The agricultural trading entities have real commodity contracts with real counterparties and real logistics infrastructure. The infrastructure fund has delivered real returns to its institutional investors, several of whom are pension funds for public sector workers in 2 northern European countries. The digital asset architecture is aggressive but defensible. You spent 3 months ensuring it was defensible. The foundation has built 11 clinics in 4 countries. It is only when you look at all 4 simultaneously, which no single regulatory body has the jurisdiction or visibility to do, that the architecture becomes visible. And even then, what you see is not a crime. What you see is a system. A system so internally consistent, so thoroughly embedded in the legitimate global economy that the question of its purpose becomes genuinely difficult to answer with legal precision. This is what you build. The file this morning tells you that the digital asset architecture has developed a problem. A 23-year-old compliance analyst at a mid-tier exchange in Singapore has flagged an anomalous pattern in a sequence of transactions that pass through a subsidiary entity 3 layers into the digital architecture. The flag is, in isolation, unremarkable, the kind of thing that gets raised and reviewed and closed dozens of days across the global digital asset ecosystem. What makes this flag different is that the analyst, whose name is in the file and whose file you have now read 3 times, is apparently unusually persistent. She has not accepted the initial review outcome. She has escalated twice within her organization. She has, according to the consortium's monitoring infrastructure, begun sharing her analysis informally with a contact at the Monetary Authority. She has not found the architecture. She has found a thread. You know better than anyone what happens when someone finds a thread. You spend the rest of the morning working through the structural implications. This is the part of the work that you have never fully been able to routinize, not because it is technically difficult, although it is, but because it requires a quality of attention that cannot be automated or delegated. You are essentially playing chess against a position you designed, finding the moves that a persistent and intelligent opponent might make and redesigning the board so those moves lead nowhere. The Singapore thread connects, if followed with sufficient persistence and the right analytical tools, to a holding entity in the Cayman Islands that connects to a trust structure in Jersey that connects to an account relationship that is 2 steps from the agricultural trading network in sub-Saharan Africa. The chain has 7 links. Each link individually passes scrutiny. The chain as a whole tells a story that cannot be told. You need to remove 2 of the 7 links and replace them with something that tells a different story while maintaining the flow integrity of the system. The capital still needs to move. It always still needs to move. What needs to change is the narrative the movement tells when you trace it backward. You work for 9 hours. You do not eat. You drink 4 cups of coffee and a glass of water that you leave half-finished on the table next to the book you are still on the same page of. By 4 in the afternoon, you have the redesign. It is, you think, looking at it with the particular evaluative detachment you have developed over 6 years of this work, quite good. Better than the original section it replaces in ways that would not have been obvious before the Singapore analyst created the pressure that forced you to improve it. There is something about the work that you have never fully made peace with, the way that scrutiny makes the system stronger, the way that being found part way makes the unfound portion more robust, the way that the analyst in Singapore, by pulling the thread, has inadvertently caused the architecture to become more invisible than it was before she started looking. You send the redesign through the protocol. 3 packets, 3 servers, 3 jurisdictions. You close the laptop. The consortium manages your professional life with a precision that you recognize